So for the fourth car that I own, it is a 1993 Honda Accord Coupe EX manual. That's right, manual. So how did I get that Accord? I actually had to drive 2 hours away. Wifey was with me at the time and she definitely saw in my face how much I enjoyed the car. So I did start a YouTube channel with that car, but I wasn't consistent enough to post on it daily. Starting with the bad, everything was bad. The car had a lot of rust. Most of it was hidden, but eventually it came to the surface. Had small dents and scratches here and there. Had a small oil leak. AC didn't work that well. Now for the major bad, the clutch was going out. Test drove it with a blown clutch. It worked when you stepped on it lightly, but if you go full on throttle, it'll just rev up and pretty much won't go anywhere. I figured it would be okay to buy because this was my first manual car. I'd learn how to drive manual and not worry about damaging the clutch because I was replacing it anyways. Now for the good stuff, it was an EX, so it did have power everything. Power steering, power windows, power locks, AC that barely blew cold, working sunroof. The rear windows were pretty dope. Paint was pretty good surprisingly. It looked really clean for its age. Brakes were similar to the other 93 Accord. It did have the ABS light, but it worked better. I'm not sure why. And best of all, it was a coupe. Coupes are so rare for that year. I mostly see sedans and that's pretty much it. That car gave me a lot of nostalgia and I loved my first Accord. I didn't treat that car right, so I kind of felt like I had to redeem myself with this one. And now for the mod list. I got a whole grocery list. I did unusual intake and header. For the exhaust, I kept it stock besides the muffler and later ended up replacing it with an axleback exhaust. Oh yeah, did I mention I did a 5-lug conversion? Damn! Yup, I swapped that bitch out. Hands down, best decision I did with that car. It opened up so many wheel possibilities, and yet I ran OEM Honda wheels. Ideally, I wanted the TL Type S wheels, but they were going for crazy high prices at the time and it did require some work to make it fit. Of course, I was a little bit of a wheel whore. My absolute favorite on the car was the Prelude wheels. It's pretty much a perfect match. And my daily was the Civic Si wheels. Those look pretty dope too. I ended up only buying one set of aftermarket wheels and they were the Kosei K1s. Nothing crazy, 16x7s. Those look pretty dope and they were super light. For suspension, I had the Koni Sport Cup Kit, which is pretty much Koni Yellows with New Speed Sport Springs. They rode so good, guys. Like it was pretty much ready to track. I had front and rear sway bar from Progress, along with the Progress strut bar. I had a rear strut bar, lower tie bar, adjustable camber kit. As for other mods, I black housed the headlights, added amber corners, then replaced them with some nice JDM one-piece headlights. I had the all clear setup in the front and I absolutely loved it. Added some side markers, painted the front grille, had different lips on including the Honda Accord CD5 lip, had an Acura Legend lip. I finally had my first official carbon fiber part, which was the VIS carbon fiber hood. And I have a little story about that. Finally tinted the windows along with window visors, had a rear window visor, did a sedan trunk swap so that I can install the red clear taillights, had a pretty rare Accord Coupe badge. For the interior, I did LED bulbs wherever I can, swapped the center console out for a JDM one because the JDM one had a built-in armrest with storage. It's weird, but it's something uncommon with the early 90s Japanese cars. Had an aftermarket radio, upgraded the speakers, I had an orange password JDM shift knob, ended up swapping the seats a couple times. I had the Prelude driver's seat, which was pretty much a direct swap, and I also had RSX seats that I got for cheap and I had to make it work, but it did fit. And now my favorite mod for the interior, I swapped the steering wheel for a genuine Acura Integra Type R Momo steering wheel, and it cost me a pretty penny back then. I might be missing a few mods here and there, but overall I did a lot of work on that car. There's just too many stories that I have of this car, but this car made me pretty much the car enthusiast I am today. I did so many repairs, so many mods, so many upgrades, but I will share a couple things. Number one, it did get into an accident, and this was not my fault at all. Car was parked on the street, car backed into it in the rear quarter panel or where the rear door would be, and it made a pretty big dent. I pulled the dent out as much as possible, and it wasn't really worth the repair. To repair that area, they would have to cut the whole thing, weld a new sheet of metal, repaint it and all that, and would probably cost as much as the car. So that's why I never got it repaired. But on a positive note, this was the car that made me get better at driving manual. But it doesn't stop there. Wifey actually learned to drive manual on this car. Yes, she knows how to drive manual. Maybe I'll make a future video with her if she's down. And she does drive the TL once in a while. I ended up selling this car to a close friend of mine at the time, and a lot of parts on the car I sold to a different buddy of mine. He owned the same generation Accord, and I was really happy to let all those parts go to him. And before I sold the car, I drove around so much. I let wifey drive it as much as she wanted, and she didn't want to do it at the time, but I made her do a small burnout with the car. I just told her to rev it up, dump the clutch, and go. And she actually ended up doing a small burnout, and it was pretty awesome. Oh, and about the carbon fiber hood. So I used to do a lot of junkyard runs when I owned that car. I used to look for parts for wifey's car. She owned a different car at the time. A lot of things for the Accord so I can retrofit it on. And the one junkyard that I went to was pretty organized, and I spotted this one Accord that looked slightly different. I forgot what I was looking for. I lifted up the hood. I was like, this doesn't feel like a normal hood. Why is it completely different? Keep in mind, it was a black car and the hood was completely gray. Like the clear coat was gone everywhere, so it did blend in really well. After lifting up the hood and wondering why it was so light and different, I definitely checked it out. And what do you know? It said VIS. It had a whole little plaque for it. It had the serial number on it and everything. I immediately got my tools, took it off, and was able to carry it one-handed to the car. And I pretty much got it for 40 bucks. A full carbon fiber hood. Granted, it did have small cracks and it did need to be restored, but 40 bucks for a full carbon fiber hood. That is insane, guys. I tried my best restoring it with the limited amount of skills that I had, and it came out looking pretty good. It had to be rebuffed so that it can have that full clean shine. Ended up installing it a few days later, and anytime I drove on the highway, it was so light that it would flop around. After that, I shortly ordered some hood pins. Kind of crazy that you have to drill through carbon fiber to install it, but I did make it work, and that's pretty much it for the story. I got a carbon fiber hood for 40 bucks. Too many things that I learned from this car. Number one, importantly, how to drive manual. A whole bunch of maintenance repairs. I did the brakes so many times on this car. You guys might know what I'm talking about, because when you replace the calipers and then they leak a few months later or almost immediately, that stuff sucks. Then you got to go back to the parts store, get that replaced or swapped out for new ones, go back, reinstall it, learn how to change the starter, spark plugs, anything small or big. I always tried to do myself on that car. I learned a whole bunch of stuff about suspension because of the 5-lug swap, plus did a whole bunch of mods. And now I'm bringing all that knowledge to the car that I have now. And now an extra segment for this video. What would I do with the car if I had it today? This swap is a little more common and you might know where I'm going with this. It is a K-swap. Yes, if I had it today, I would definitely try a K-swap. I really gotta admit, them K motors, they're 4 cylinders, but they're so good. They're super reliable, have so much potential, so much aftermarket support. It's ridiculous. That's why I definitely want that swap. Throw some BC coilovers in there, keep all the JDM stuff like the one-piece headlights, fog lights, do a trunk swap to a sedan, make it have red clears, nice and clean, maybe add a front lip. For suspension, definitely keeping that 5-lug swap, definitely throwing throwing the Type S wheels on there. I don't care if there are lighter wheels like the RPF ones. The Type S wheels are my favorite. Paint the car black, and that's definitely my dream build. But that wraps it up for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.